Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Gagnon, and I am studying architecture. I am not technologically advanced like the rest of you. I could not figure out the PowerPoint presentation to save my life, so I'm going to include a YouTube video link and a PowerPoint link in the discussion, and you'll just start them both at the same time and follow along. We're going to start on the title slide, and then I will tell you guys when to switch slides. So this is the title slide. And I'm published in the journal International Journal for Housing Science and Its Applications, published by housingscience.org. And they're always writing about new methods and approaches to how they can better construct buildings, and have more utility. There's always new ways we can utilize building materials, whether it be aesthetically, structurally, economically. And for them, they really don't care as much about how buildings look like. They care more about their utility. What can they do? What's their purpose? And their audience is mainly architects and civil engineers. While anyone can read it, they just specifically, there's jargon that uh, really relates to these people. All right, so we're going to move on to the next slide, titled Writing Conventions. So they always write in APA format, and their paragraphs tend to be about processes and problem solving. And the paragraphs are usually about 10 to 15 sentences. I try to stick to that as much as possible. And then their support, when it says observational, they don't really mean like aesthetically. They mean, like I said, creating utility, empirically speaking, based off of research. And then with images, I couldn't really add images to my paper, but I do have the images of Stefano Boeri's original Mulan designs in this PowerPoint, so you guys will get to see those. But they use statistics. They're really logical. They don't, like I said, they don't really care about aesthetics that much. But sources are referenced more than paraphrased. Uh, no, they're referenced and paraphrased more than directly quoted. Writing styles, they're really formal about it and straightforward. They don't really, stretch out any explanations. They explain what they have to, then they move on. All right, next slide, also titled Writing Conventions. So for formal tone, they don't really like to use that much creative writing. I accidentally did that towards the end because, if you're passionate about something, of course, you're going to go a little artistic with your writing about it, but I tried to stay formal for the most part. Then addressing possible counter arguments, I did that at the end of my paper, which is what everyone else in the journal did. They usually kept it towards the end. And then used proper support. I did that for the most part. I used some non-scholarly sources like news companies like the Fast Company and Business Insider because they had interviews with the architect and inside information about his designs that you couldn't really find anywhere else besides an interview. I did not reach average page length, because someone else is grading it and I didn't want them to read like half a book. And then citing sources more than referenced. I cited the sources, like I said, they're news companies, so you don't really reference those. So moving on to the next slide, planning. So what I want to do first was describe and make it known that as population increases, so does air pollution in the cities. Because that's where 50% of the population lives in urban areas, 50% in rural. And this is mainly about the urban areas. So because there's like more cars and more industrialization in the cities, air pollution and CO2 emissions are rising, and we're not really doing much about it. So Stefano Boeri's designs, what they do is they're like vertical forests. He's got balconies on the outside of his buildings that he plants trees in, and they can fit like acres of forest, in one plot of land, one building. And what these do is I want to explain the direct and indirect benefits of these designs and what the trees do, and then address the counter arguments, like I said at the end. Next slide, called Proposal Summary. You can see one of Stefano Boeri's designs right there on the left. But it says Stefano Boeri's utilization of trees can drastically decrease the CO2 levels in rural areas. So what I really wanted to get through was that these ideas need to be normalized. They do exist. There's a few, and a lot of people have seen these works and they try to recreate them. He didn't copyright his work at all because he wants other architects to pretty much do what he's doing. He wants to see these designs everywhere. And that's the pretty much the main summary. Next slide for the research. The first one titled Hansen H, that's from NASA, and that had to do with the seasonal changes. So like in the wintertime, as the leaves die, the leaves are absorbing less CO2 and producing less oxygen. So of course, the air pollution and CO2 levels in the wintertime are going to increase. And then they're the lowest in the summertime when the trees have all their leaves. So it's cyclical in nature. And that's kind of an important detail for my rebuttal that I needed. And the effects of urban trees on air quality. This had some good information on how trees absorb air pollution and how much they can. The Inside China's plan for a massive forest-covered city. This is a news article from the Fast Company I was talking about. They have the interview with Stefano Boeri, and he gives us a lot of good information that you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. And then the Weller Sea Business Insider, that is also another news company. But overall, we've got NASA and we've got forestry.gov. We've got some government websites here, so decent credibility. We're going to move to the next slide, the thesis. So the thesis was four cities play an important role in decreasing air pollution in the cities. Right now, they give tax cuts to companies that kind of reduce their emissions, but that's not enough because some people just simply can't reduce their emissions, and some people it's just not worth it paying the extra to change their entire business model and their operations. They won't. But the benefits must be weighed against the potential barriers that shed light on the impacts these buildings can have on society. We want to pretty much normalize these buildings. So any company that wants to build a new building in a city, we want them to think and consider these designs before they do it. So next slide for summary of the article. Some main claims are that trees reduce CO2 levels. That's pretty much all the paper is about. But there are also side benefits, like saving on electricity. This would happen from saving on heating in the wintertime because the trees block the wind, and then in the summertime they save on air conditioning because the trees block the sun's rays. And when they're saving this electricity, they're burning less fossil fuel, which emits less CO2 in the atmosphere, so it's like a win-win situation. And then cutting back on air pollution isn't enough. Our technology is not there yet, and we're not efficient enough. But as long as support goes, we've got support from the towers in Milan that are already built and standing. This says that they house as many trees as might be found on 5 to 7 acres of forest, roughly a tenth of the land. And then another big support that helps a lot is that marginal cost. It only costs 5% more than a traditional skyscraper. And that's what most people are worried about, is the cost of these designs versus normal skyscrapers. And then call to action is the next slide, so you guys can move on. And there are numerous ways these designs can benefit society in the long run. Best solution we have so far, but it doesn't mean we should stop trying. And then what can be done to reduce the social and economic barriers to normalize and encourage these designs is the question I want the readers to leave with. And as always, thank you.